Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well. In this video, I want to talk to you about the question about whether Bitcoin is going to go to 100K and potentially even 120K by next year in 2024. There's been a number of articles and videos about this subject, so I want to talk to you about this. Join me. Alright guys, welcome back. So I thought I'd make a quick video about this question, which I'm seeing popping up now in a number of online articles and some videos about the likelihood of Bitcoin going to 120K or 100K sometime next year in 2024. Now I have to say to you, I find this very amusing because only a few months ago, if you go back to the beginning of this year, there's a lot of articles and videos all over YouTube about how Bitcoin is going to crash and go to, I don't know, below 10K or go to 9K. I saw a whole bunch of videos on YouTube saying, oh, it's the end of the world, the end is coming. You know, it's going to collapse, it's going to finish, going to crash. By the way, as you probably remember, I've remained bullish on Bitcoin since the beginning of this year, and I explained to you why. But notice that now that Bitcoin has rallied in the last several weeks, now people are changing their tune. So all these article writers and all these YouTubers and analysts, or I call them analysts, suddenly they're not changing their tune. They're changing their perspective. They're not going from extremely bearish to becoming positive now. So now you're seeing articles and videos being made about Bitcoin going to 100K or 120K. Now let me say this. My point in this video is not to tell you that that's never going to happen. No, that's absolutely possible. It is entirely possible that Bitcoin could go to those levels that those analysts are talking about, like 100K to 120K, perhaps sometime next year in 2024. My question in this video is, what are the targets? What are the key levels we have to reach, first of all, before we can speculate that Bitcoin is going to go to 100K or 120K? In other words, is it a bit premature to even speculate right now that Bitcoin is going to go above 100K, let alone the fact we have not even reached the all-time highs yet? So that's what I want to talk about with you. So let me show you this chart of Bitcoin. First of all, this is the weekly chart of Bitcoin. It's quite long-term. As you can see, this is from the highs we made near 69K in 2021 to the lows we made last year in 2022, as you can see, near 16K. Now, what I've done is I put on that chart, first of all, this blue line. That's the 21 weekly moving average, a very important key level on the chart. And you've probably heard me talking about it before in my earlier videos. Notice when Bitcoin rallied and pushed above with that green bar, that was the beginning of this year. I think that was back in January of this year. So when Bitcoin pushed and rallied in that green bar above the 21 weekly moving average, and when it stayed above it at least 2 or 3 weeks, so at least you had a couple of weeks after it stayed above that 21 weekly with some green bars, that increased the probability that a likely reversal happened in trend. In other words, the trend went from a bear market to a potential bull market. Or in other words, the trend changed from bearish to bullish. And in fact, that's the reason. That was one of the reasons I got bullish on Bitcoin at the beginning of this year. That wasn't the only reason. The other reason I mentioned at the beginning of this year, and that was when the MACD on the 2-week time frame gave us a bullish crossover. In fact, here's a clip. We'll come back. And now as I'm making this video for you, we have a fresh signal on the 2-week chart of Bitcoin. As you can see here, the MACD indicator is giving us a bullish crossover. I think the way things are looking right now, as long as Bitcoin stays above this support level, then it could result in significant bullishness and indeed potential uptrend for Bitcoin going to the rest of 2023. So it's a very good sign. I think it's a very positive sign, probably one of the first positive sign we've seen on Bitcoin for a very long time. I think the odds, the probabilities have increased now for a substantially bullish or indeed powerful rally in the price of Bitcoin in the next several months, going to perhaps to the middle, to the end of 2023. But there's something important I want to mention here is you might be thinking, well, hang on, didn't Bitcoin go above the 21 weekly in the spring of last year in 2022? Yes, it did. But notice, when Bitcoin climbed and went above the 21 weekly, it did not stay above it for at least 2 or 3 weeks. In fact, it quickly failed and then dropped back in a red bar below the 21 weekly very soon afterwards. This is why my rule is that when price breaches and goes above the 21 weekly, it needs to stay above that level for at least 2 or 3 weeks to give us an increasing probability that it's not a false break or it's not some kind of fake rally. So that's why when price goes above the 21 weekly, as you can see in that green bar at the beginning of this year, it's a good idea to just be patient and just wait for a few bars, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, just to make sure it's not a bear trap or a false break. By the way, another bullish clue came for Bitcoin when it pulled back to the 21 weekly and then formed this hammer-shaped candlestick pattern, as you can see, right above the 21 weekly, and that is usually a good sign, a positive sign, when Bitcoin holds above the 21 weekly despite the pullback or retracement. Now, if we now put on our chart our Fibonacci levels, so these are logarithmic Fibonacci levels. And by the way, for Bitcoin, what I prefer to do is to enable the logarithmic setting within the Fibonacci retracement levels. So as you can see there, now we've got these lines, these horizontal lines on the chart. That orange line was a 38.2% Fibonacci level, which by the way, we were expecting to be reached at the beginning of this year. So right at the beginning of this year, I was calling for this level of 27K or 27,376 to be reached.
I'm looking for a bullish uptrend, or at least a retracement rally, eventually to take us to 27,376, which is the logarithmic 38.2% retracement of the entire decline.
So after we reach that first target, the next level comes up, as you can see, the 50% retracement. That's about 32,660. And the most important level, it's a level I mentioned to our members recently, and that is the 61.8% golden ratio retracement, which is right there about 39K. Or let's just round it up, make it simple, about 40K. So that means if Bitcoin is going to make some kind of retracement, some kind of a rally this year, okay, which I think is more likely. I think as long as Bitcoin stays above the June lows, it's more likely for the path of least resistance and the overall trend to remain to the upside, despite any pullbacks which may happen. So overall, usually when price retraces its prior decline, so that's the prior crash of last year, as you can see there. So usually price likes to retrace back. In other words, price likes to move back, ideally to its golden ratio 61.8% level, which by the way on Bitcoin, as I mentioned earlier, is about 39 to 40K. So that remains my higher probability target for the next several months for Bitcoin. And this is why I think a lot of the analysts out there, again, on social media and on YouTube, who are saying that Bitcoin is going to go to 100K or 120K sometime in 2024. Now, they may be right. It's possible. But the question is it probable at the moment? And I would say it's too soon. It's too soon to call that. So I'm not going to speculate at this point about whether Bitcoin is going to go to 100K or 120K, whether it's likely or not. The point is that as long as Bitcoin stays below its 61.8% golden ratio retracement at about 39 to 40K, the whole question about whether Bitcoin is going to go to 100 or 120K is way too premature. It's too early. And by the way, as we know, Bitcoin has not even taken out the prior highs yet, the prior all-time highs near 69K. So my point is, Bitcoin has got to first prove to us and show to us that it wants to go over the 61.8% golden ratio retracement at 40K. That is the first hurdle, that's the first obstacle for Bitcoin. Let's see if Bitcoin gets over that obstacle sometime this year. And the second point is, can it stay above that? So if Bitcoin can get above that 40K, that 61.8% golden ratio retracement level, if it gets above that level and stays above it for at least a number of weeks, as I mentioned earlier, whenever price gets above a certain resistance level, we have to see if it stays above that for at least a number of bars. So on the weekly chart, at least for a few weeks, to avoid any kind of false breaks or any kind of bear traps. So again, Bitcoin has to first got to prove to us and show to us whether it can get over the 61.8% golden ratio retracement at about 40K and stay above it for a number of weeks, just to increase the probability that it's not a false break or a bear trap. But if Bitcoin can succeed in getting over the 40K level or 39K level and staying above that level for a number of weeks, that actually could increase the likelihood that potentially we could move towards 50K, maybe even towards the all-time highs. But remember, that still does not mean that Bitcoin is going to go to 100K or 120K next year in 2024, okay? It's still way too premature, way too early. Sure, we can speculate and say it's a possibility, but to make it a high probability or a likelihood, I think at this point in time, it's way too early and way too premature, so I'm not going to even go there. Let's first of all see if Bitcoin can get to the resistance levels I mentioned in this video, like for example, 39 to 40K. And if we can take out those levels and stay above them, then we can talk about the probability of Bitcoin going towards the all-time highs near 69K and potentially taking that level out. But remember guys, going back to my first question in this video, is it likely that Bitcoin is going to go to 100K or to 120K? We don't know. And actually nobody knows. And I think at this point, speculating so far in advance about 100 and 120K, in my view, it's rather unwise. It's a bit of fun, but I don't think it's actually a very good question because a number of things have not happened yet to increase the likelihood or probability of those high targets like 100 and 120K levels being reached. All right, guys, let me know your own views about this in the comment section. And by the way, guys, make sure you join me for the members video on Sunday, where we're going to Bitcoin and the Bitcoin charts in much more detail. And if you're not a member, you can join on that link you see right there. Thank you very much indeed. Bye for now.